CCTV's Nathan King spoke to UN Undersecretary General Kyung-wha on the topic of refugees. He asked her about the global challenge.
Well, globally, we're talking about some 60 million plus people forcibly displaced by conflict, violence, persecution in their home country. Now, 2/3 of the 60 plus million are what we call IDPs, i.e. displaced within their own country, and the remaining 1/3 are what we know as refugees, i.e. people who have crossed borders into other countries. For example, in Syria, we're talking about 4.8 million refugees who have left the country, but there are 70 million plus people inside the country who have been displaced by this conflict, and in many cases, many times over. So altogether, that's about 60 million people forcibly displaced, and this is the largest number of people who have suffered this consequence since the end of World War II.
Obviously, a lot of focus on Syria, refugees in Jordan, Lebanon, and of course, Turkey as well. Is the world stepping up in terms of delivering the money that's needed to care for these people?
I have to say no, because the appeal that we started out with at the beginning of this year, for all of these appeals, for Syria, for Yemen, for Ethiopia with the El Nino drought food crisis, altogether were an appeal for about 37, 38 countries come together to about $20.1 billion. And today we've seen only about 12 of that materialized, 12% of that materialized. So we need a lot more to be able to meet the immediate humanitarian needs of the forcibly displaced and other people who are stuck in humanitarian crises. And we need the world to step up a lot more in terms of the resource requirements.
Why isn't the world stepping up? We see headlines every day about refugees, about the desperate situation in Syria and, as you said, in beyond. Why aren't they stepping up?
Well, I think we've come to the limit in terms of the existing way in which we have funded responses to humanitarian crises. I think the traditional donors have reached their limit in terms of their capacity to fund humanitarian operations. We are reaching out to potential new donors. We are trying to come up with new ways of mobilizing funds. And I think the existing ways of funding these crisis situations have reached the maximum limit, which is why the Secretary General appointed a high-level panel on humanitarian financing to come up with some novel ways in which we can find new sources of funding, find ways to gain efficiencies and transparencies in the way we use the existing funds out there, and to reach out to new donors for these crisis situations. But we're also saying these humanitarian caseloads, for example, the 60 million forcibly displaced, should not be just the concern of humanitarians alone. When you're talking about displacement, which lasts on average 17 years. Once people are displaced, they are caught in this limbo situation. I mean, it becomes a life sentence for many of these people. 17 years, that's no longer just a humanitarian concern. That has to be also a development concern. And it is also the case that these displaced people are not just humanitarian cases. There are people with rights and dignities and aspirations like just any of us, and they are some of the most resilient people that you will find. I was told by the president of Safaricom in Kenya, for example, that their biggest profit is made in the area of the Dadaab refugee camp for Somalis. So, and these are people who have been in this refugee camp situation for decades, and there they still have that resilience, which, given the right apparatus and tools, they become the most resilient, and they will use whatever resources available to them to build up their livelihoods and resilience. So I think we need to approach the refugees, the IDP population, as part of the longer-term development and economic growth trajectory of the host countries and communities.